Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and call to order this work session meeting, September 8th, 2021. Mr. Cockrell?
Yeah, I would like to, since we had such public comment this morning, move the appeal item to the beginning of the agenda. And I know Ms. Purdy has indicated to me that the advanced, that her agreement for time and attendance, she has to get back with some vendors. So if we could move that to second, I think that would help us with efficiencies.
All right, is that all right with my colleagues? Okay, all right. So we will start with the Seven Oaks appeal. Mr. Cockrell.
Yeah, and I'll just briefly go over what we discussed at last week's work session, and that the timeline indicates that you have to make a decision whether to have a hearing or not prior to 15 days from when we received the appeal. That we received it 14 days ago, and we don't have a public meeting really scheduled for tomorrow. So I think today is the day. If you make a determination to not hear it or make no determination, then the appeal is deemed rejected and denied. If you determine to make to have a hearing on this appeal, I guess I would have a couple recommendations. The first would be that you do it on a Thursday at 2 p.m., which is the normal time slot for the township assistance hearings and other ordinance violation hearings. Clearly, I would not expect you to do that tomorrow, but the next Thursday would be appropriate. That hearing has to occur within 15 days from a determination. So if for whatever reason parties request an extension, you could extend it till the following Thursday, but then you've got to do it then, essentially. I would also ask, since we're going to do this via Zoom, that you request that any exhibit or information be provided to you, to me, and then I can distribute it to you by 1 p.m. on September 15th. So that would give us time to work with TSD to figure out how to get them shared and how to get the witness list so that the TSD can work through the myriad of people who would be in attendance at that, if there are a lot, just kind of practical issues. So with that, I would turn it over to you guys to see if you want to have the hearing or not.
Okay, first, Mr. Schilling's joined us. Did you have something you wanted to add, Mr. Schilling? You are muted.
Not to this item.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so comments, questions, Commissioner Jones?
Yeah, this is the first time this has come up for us, it being a relatively new thing that the state has decided we should deal with. And in this case, I think partly because it's first and also because it affects so many people, I think it really is important that we go ahead and have the hearing. And I think 2 o'clock a week from tomorrow should be just fine.
Okay, Commissioner Giffens?
Yeah, I was going to ask if there are different witnesses called, do we have to have that witness list given to us in advance? Can we call witnesses? How does that work?
Typically, the parties would call the witnesses. And again, my recommendation is we get that list at least a day before the hearing, so we can make sure that from a technical standpoint that we know what's going on and can work with TSD to make that run efficiently. I don't think, well, the commissioners, it would be unusual for the adjudicators to call witnesses, but certainly they can question others. We use a fairly informal format when we're dealing with these. So once a witness is up there, and if you have any questions or about what their testimony is for clarification, I think that's wholly appropriate. Again, the two parties in this would be the health department and the Seven Oaks school. So they should provide the information to you and the availability of that information to you during the process.
Great. I agree. I think we should hear this for the public's sake, for transparency's sake. Does somebody want to go ahead and make a motion?
I move that we have a public hearing for Seven Oaks classical school appeal about the face mask wearing, and we will have it at 2 o'clock on Thursday. I believe it's September 16th.
Second.
Okay, and I would add to that that all information and exhibits need to be sent to Mr. Cockrell by 1 p.m. on Wednesday, the 15th, if that's okay with both of you. Yes, okay.
And I would just note that Ms. Jones said public hearing. This is a hearing, right? It's not a public hearing. It will, I mean, the public can certainly attend it and view and watch, but it's much more of an adjudication as opposed to what we traditionally consider a public hearing.
Okay.
That's a great point. Yeah, good. Okay. So other comments, questions on that? Okay. So Mr. Cocker, will you please call the roll on the motion to hear this appeal Thursday, September 16th, 2 p.m. and that all exhibits and information will be sent to you by the 15th of September.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Githens.
Yes.
Motion is approved, 3-0.
Okay, excellent. So we will get that on the calendar, and obviously Mr. Cockrell will contact the appellant. All right. So Ms. Purdy, we have got some visitors waiting, so we want to move your agenda item up next. This is item 5 on everyone's agenda, just so you can follow it. Go ahead and tell us all about it.
Okay, thank you. This is an agreement with Advanced Time Management, and they are working with Lau Associates. Lau Associates is the provider of the county financial and payroll software. And Advanced Time Management has created an attendance on-demand software that works with our current financial software. The service and support that's in this agreement falls under our Lau agreement. And I just thought it would be appropriate to have Mr. Andrew Lau and Michael Beldman from Andrew Lau is obviously with Lau Associates, and Michael Beldman with Advanced Time speak a little bit about this project. And I also want to add that we've already had meetings with our department heads along with payroll and HR. So Andy, do you have anything you'd like to share before we turn it over to Michael?
I'll try and be brief. I just wanted to say that this was a direction that we decided to go after the pandemic hit, that we felt we needed to, as a payroll company, be a lot more tuned into the time and attendance space and what that meant for our customers, county government moving forward. But at the same time, we knew all of the struggles that that companies have. We'd seen that over the course of time with county government and the way they're structured and the way they work. So we want to be able to work out an agreement that made sense for us and for Advanced Time, that allowed us the flexibility to do some different things with county government that aren't traditionally done in a normal payroll and time and attendance environment. So we made a lot of changes to the way our two systems communicated. Advanced Time was our very first partner in the time and attendance space. So it was a very easy transition to take that partnership to the next level. And we've had a lot of success so far rolling out this newer integration and newer software that's going to integrate the payroll system directly into the time and attendance system, and then back into payroll when the time is appropriate to import payroll. So it's a pretty streamlined operation, and we're looking forward to hopefully working with Monroe County a little bit further.
Thanks, Andy. Michael, do you have anything you'd like to share? We've also given you the ability to share your screen if you have something to share, but otherwise. Um,
I certainly do. Can you hear me okay?
yes.
Awesome. So I'm going to share, hopefully I shared the right screen here. I might not have. Hold on a second. Let's try that again. There we go. So you should probably see a login screen here. Do you see this okay, everybody, before I get started? Okay, very good. So we're going to be just kind of conceptual here. First of all, we want to be able to give all the employees empowerment that they need. We don't want to hide anything from them. We want them to be able to see stuff that's going on. And that can be done anywhere from very simplistic to time clocks, which a lot of counties will use time clocks in certain areas. They will utilize the same technology they're using today for access control. So that same badge they're using today, they will also use to punch in and out and also query information about them at the time clock. But we also give them access to be able to access the system through portals, either through browser or through phones. And again, I'm just going to be very conceptual here. The whole idea here is to give them the ability to monitor, to be able to look and not have to go anywhere for this information. It should be here at my fingertips. Anything from when I'm supposed to work, what I did work, what are my benefit balances, if we're keeping track of things like vacation or PTO or comp time, where does all that stand for me today? I can get on the system and look at this from anywhere, whether it's my home or on site. I have access to this, and I can also even do it through my phone. So try to make it as much information and engagement for the employees as possible. We also give the employees abilities to do things. So if we want them to be able to punch or request time off, you are in control of that. What can they do? What can't they do when they access the system? So that's kind of the first level. The second level is more of the management and HR and payroll side of it. So things happen out there. Mistakes get made. Employees are going to make mistakes. Things are going to get missed. So we want to give supervisors control to help monitor what's happening with those employees. And we give them a large amount of tools to monitor those employees. Anything from showing data on a calendar format to just giving me a quick to-do list of things that I should monitor as a manager. What's going on with my employees? Are the hours right? Do things look good? Do I have too many people off tomorrow? These kind of things. This is the data I can provide to them, and it's real-time data that they can see by logging in from anywhere that they have access to a computer or to a tablet. So a lot of abilities here for management to be able to go in and quickly look at things. And we give them the ability to make corrections. I'm not going to go into a lot of things as far as what they can do, but just know that a manager, if they make any type of correction on here, they have the ability to do so with employees, as well as we monitor everything that's done with that employee. So if I'm a manager and I make corrections or adjustments, it is monitored who did what they did to which record. So for auditing purposes, it's always there. Okay. We're going to also, for the managers, and I apologize, I don't have this up, but we also will provide the voucher for them to sign off on. And it'll be a simple report that they can take off of here. It'll be a voucher designed for them. They will print off that voucher so they can sign off on the information. So once they feel everything's good, they can sign off on that voucher. And now payroll doesn't have to wait for anything. They don't have to get any paperwork or documentation or anything. Nothing needs to be emailed because it's all in this database. And now payroll has the ability to say, I'm ready to go ahead and process payroll. I feel everything is correct. And I'm going to go ahead now and create my export for payroll processing. So this is kind of the concept behind it, giving the employees the ability, giving management the tools, and then making that payroll process as automated as possible. Okay.
And the last piece I would add to what Mike said, he touched on the voucher. The voucher is a huge deal for the department heads. For those that do not know, that it's something that's very county driven from State Board of Accounts. So it's something that the department heads wind up having to put a lot of effort and energy into. We're going to be able to take that process and automate that process and create that voucher directly out of the data we get from time and attendance. The other thing that department heads generally have to track is the employee service record. And it's, if anybody's seen it, in actual physical form, it's a bear. It's not pretty to look at, and it's really just old. So the idea with the time and attendance system is that you're going to be able to get rid of that eventually when they're ready to get rid of that as well. So two big pieces of physical paper that happen on a biweekly basis that we're going to be able to remove from that aspect and really streamline and automate the payroll process with that. And then the last thing is the implementation, and the implementation should not be easy because counties have a lot of rules. And so anybody who tells you implementation is going to be easy is lying to you. And so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tell you that it's supposed to be difficult, and it's supposed to take effort and energy and work. And that's why we're here. That's why Lau's sitting in the middle of this. I mean, you could just as easily have gone to advanced time management and got the system from them, but we have to help facilitate the county aspect of this, how it works, how it functions, how the county runs. And advanced time doesn't always know those things. That's why they need us for that period of time as we sit in on the implementations, we sit in on the meetings and help guide those meetings where necessary. And we've seen it all. We're in almost 60 counties in the state, so we've seen a lot of different rules, done a lot of different ways, and we can give feedback. We can tell you, hey, this policy, you might want to think about changing that. or the other aspect of that is, hey, you have two policies that are very, very similar. Does it make sense from your perspective to put those two policies and make those two policies the same, so you can get from maybe 14 policies over 28 departments to 5, 6 policies, something that's more manageable for payroll. Because once you automate these things, now you've got to put them in place and actually have somebody understand them in order to make sure that the system's calculating it correctly. So when you have a ton of policies built in, great to say you could do it all, but now you have to facilitate it and manage it. So those are the hard parts, and that's what we're going to help bring to the table with the implementation side of this as well.
Yeah, and the other thing I would like to add is that the employee has to approve their time card, as does their manager, and then eventually when it goes to payroll, then it's also reviewed again by payroll. So there are these checks and balances already built into the software.
Great. Thank you both so much. And thank you, Ms. Purdy, for finding this. Comments, questions, Commissioner Jones?
Well, I appreciate the comment that this is not going to happen easily, because almost nothing like this ever happens easily. And there can be a lot of pushback because of that. So it's good to just know right up front that it'll probably take a bit of time and there will be a few glitches to work out. But in the end, it does sound like it'll be very helpful to have this.
Commissioner Giffens?
Yes, even before you brought up the issue that it's going to be a little painful, I had written down wanting to know how much training time will be needed for both the managers and the employees to put this in place.
Yeah, so great question. So with training, we offer actually 2 separate training sessions that are led through remote Zooms, just like you're doing today. And those are led by instructors, and we train all the supervisors. So each supervisor, it's probably about an hour to an hour and a half training. You really can't go beyond that because you will not keep their attention beyond that. And then with administrators, there's a lot of hand holding with them because they are going to get the questions coming from supervisors, and we want to arm them with the knowledge of being able to head those questions off very quickly and easily. So we spend a lot of time with them. In addition, there's training documents and video libraries, all accessible to all users in the system. So if I need to figure out something, I can find it out fairly quickly.
And then as far as Lao is concerned, we're going to be the frontline support to this once it's operational and up and running and everybody's using it. So just like we do now with the auditor's office, treasurer's office, HR, we're going to periodically pop in, make sure that everything's running well. But if we need to step in and get involved and we see that, you know, somebody doesn't seem to be either understanding it or they need a little extra, that's where, you know, periodically checking in on things and making sure they're going well. We can easily say, hey, Mike, we need to get another training on the books here and get this group up and running, or we need to sit down and we need to look real hard at the calculation that's happening for this overtime rule to make sure that it's going smoothly. So there's a lot of time that advanced time puts in up front with the admin staff and then again with the supervisors. And then post implementation, Lau will be there to help facilitate any additional trainings that need to happen.
Yeah, and I think it's really a bonus that you've worked together before and you know how one another functions, and that helps a great deal. This isn't to say that now some staff, of course, are hourly, but not all staff are hourly, and there's fewer hourly than salaried. So this is to replace that paper timesheet that supervisors submit. And it's not to say that we're going to be, this is really a question for Angie. This is not to say that people are going to have to start punching a clock, right?
They are going to have to, just like now, they are supposed to be recording their time, they're reporting into work when they leave, when they, you know, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So even though some of us are salaried, like I'm a salaried employee, however, as a government employee, I'm required to show the hours I work. So the time clock isn't going to be necessary for all people, but they could use their computer, they can use their phone, you know, because a lot of people are at different spots that are more the salaried kind of personnel. We are looking at putting some of the time clocks, though, definitely out at highway, because they definitely would like that. But we're also looking at time clocks at each of our buildings, because if an employee, say, logs in on their computer and then leaves and is forgetting that, oh, I didn't, you know, I forgot to log out, when they leave, they could actually run past that punch clock and just swipe their card so that they're out. We're trying to make it as simple for them as possible. As it is right now, people are supposed to do their timesheet each day, but we know that's not happening. So there's going to be some kind of getting used to actually, you know, writing in your time. But I think that we're going to try to make it as easy for everyone as possible.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm assuming as well that there's going to be sort of a dual timekeeping for at least one pay period, just to make sure the system's working or something like that, or some way to test the system before we go to it.
Oh yeah, there'll be a lot of thorough calculations being run and testing
Right.
being run with the administration staff. With every group that we bring on, basically, that has different rules. So we create this first group and we bring on 8 departments that have these same rules. Before we ever do that, we're going to be inserting test employees and then, you know, kind of getting together and saying, throw me your craziest scenario that you've had in this time period, and let's plug it in and let's see how the system calculates it. So they do that before and during that implementation process. And yes, they'll be doing some dual entry there for a while until I would say the departments are comfortable, but really it comes down to when payroll is comfortable. And so the nice part about the dual side is you'd be able to print the voucher report out of one system, do it by hand in your normal voucher, and ideally you're going to get the same answer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds great. I really appreciate that, Ms. Brady, that you brought this forward. And so you had mentioned that department heads had already sort of vetted this process, and I'm assuming that all of their concerns have been addressed at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, Both Andrew and Michael were present for a department head meeting, and there really wasn't too many questions at that time. I also asked department heads to send me questions, didn't really get any, but what I did get was a few people who were like, can't wait for this to start.
Yeah.
So
I bet. So colleagues, are we okay having this, putting this on our agenda next week for our regular session?
Yep.
Great. So let's move forward. Yes, sounds good. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. Appreciate it. Thank you, Ms. Purdy.
thank you both.
Great.
Thank you for your time.
Thank
I really
you.
appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good one.
All right. And so now we'll go back to our regular agenda list. First on the agenda, Nicole Brown, County Clerk. Good morning.
You cannot start your video. Yes, get it so that you can see.
Okay. Is it Ms. Wheeler who's joining us today?
Oh, because the host has dropped it.
I'm hearing voices, but I'm not
Sorry.
hearing.
You'll
We
need to move the
did-
slide out of
We're
front
here.
of the camera.
It says that our video has been dropped because the host has dropped us. Can you hear me?
Your video is currently enabled. It looks like there's something physically in front of the camera.
Oh, how about that? Okay. Sorry. All right. I don't know if for those of you, it says Karen Wheeler on the screen. She's our election supervisor here in Monroe County. I am not Karen Wheeler, but she's right here beside me. And my name is Sherry Morris, and I also work in the clerk's office on elections.
I stopped by there, you guys are going. Yeah, we're just.
And I was going to spend maybe 10 minutes going through some details with you, and just wanted to thank you for your time. We particularly want to thank you for acknowledging the need for more space for election activities and talking to the election board last week. We would like to review, just for the public's sake, and I may be preaching to the choir here, the 5 major election activities that do require a safe and secure workspace. And as you know, being under one roof is something we've said would be quite beneficial, but the space is needed. And that's kind of the message here. So I'm going to go through each of those 5. Absentee voting is a big part of the voting process, and we expect it to grow over time. By law, absentee voting requires a voter to request an absentee ballot in writing to vote. And that usually occurs either in person, which we call early voting, or by mail, which is, of course, voting by mail. And there are many steps in the process of absentee voting. In short, we confirm the voter is eligible to vote. The required paperwork, which there's a lot for absentee voting of required paperwork, make sure it's complete, make sure they have the correct ballot to vote with, and also ensuring that the voter only votes one time, because some voters do request, they'll request a ballot by mail, and just to make sure they got it, they'll send a second request, or they'll send a ballot request by mail and then come in and vote in person. So we do get multiple requests from a fair number of voters, and we of course need to manage that. And by law, if a voter who votes absentee, either in person or by mail, passes away before Election Day, we have to be able to remove their voted ballot so it's not counted. We'd love to do away with that law, but we don't have control over that. And we do have a process, an important process to do that without ever actually seeing the votes that the voter put on that ballot. But it's part of the process. Because absentee voting in person and absentee voting by mail essentially can occur at the same time, we essentially need separate spaces for each of those activities. For early voting in person, to get it set up and then to actually conduct it, requires a minimum of 4 months each year to set it up and then actually do the voting. People think it's just a month of early voting, but there's getting the equipment up, getting everybody trained, and getting the ballots ready. All of that is part of getting ready for early voting. So it starts in late February for a May election, late August for a November election. And for early voting in person, we need about 5,500 square feet of space. As you have said, and we thank you for it, the current space at Election Central has really proven, although it's a great space, it's inadequate for early voting. Every person who voted there in 2020 knows how crowded it was and how long the lines were both outside of the building as well as the multiple lines inside to vote. Social distancing was a real crowded, and we need both voters and workers to be safe, for voters to be able to vote in private, and for the process of voting to be efficient. And of course, that requires space. That early voting, early in-person absentee voting site is also our backup in case of an emergency if any of our polls at the last minute on election day can't be used. Early voting can then become the substitute place for those voting at those polls that don't work. So that's early voting in person. Voting by mail, which also occurs before election day, even takes longer time because people can request ballots earlier than they can when they are wanting to vote absentee in person. And it takes about 6 months out of a year for that process to occur. There are many steps to that process. I think they've counted 17 individual in all, but we have to ensure, of course, that the voter is qualified, receives the correct ballot and the required paperwork, and of course, only vote once. Voting by mail starts before in-person voting and runs absolutely concurrently with it. And there's some definite interaction to make sure a person is voted and only voted once. So that's why the under one roof concept is requested, but the space is very important. In 2020, for the general election, we used Election Central for vote by mail when it was available. We used the probation space you kindly offered, and we used the 3rd floor of the courthouse. So we were kind of spread and making it work in multiple locations. We need, we think, about 2,300, about 2,300 square feet for vote by mail to be functioning together. And it's, of course, it's a very important process. I have to say this, and I'm not quite sure where it came from, but we were very disheartened to hear that someone believes that election team did not use the space provided on the 3rd floor of the courthouse last fall. Please know that we used the tables both in the Nat U Hill room and the tables that were outside of the space. We truly did. It may have looked like we did it because we completely cleared them and disinfected them, using our safety protocols and safely stored things in Nat U Hill at night. But we truly did use the entirety of the space and the tables. And whoever felt that we did not use them really was mistaken. And I'm just going to say that just so you know. Maybe you've heard that from others already. So there's a space for absentee voting in person, and there's a space, hopefully a totally separate space, for managing absentee voting by mail. We also need space to manage our election equipment. It's new equipment, we love it, but we need space for it. For each election, we must program literally each individual piece of equipment. It's not connected to the internet, our equipment is not connected, but they are not just basic tablets and printers and scanners. Each unit is specifically programmed to operate a particular way at a particular voting site. And that's all done to protect the election. And we are asking for about 1,400 square feet for an equipment room year round if possible. Programmed equipment, of course, after it's programmed, is loaded out to be used at voting locations, early voting and on election day, then loaded back in after voting, and then between elections, batteries and general upgrade programs are managed on the equipment. The space at showers is crowded, but it's for storage. But it's a true challenge when we need to then pull out individual equipment and program them for where they are going to be used, and then bring them back in after the election and pull key data off of each of those machines. That is just frankly not possible in the space, and it doesn't occur right now in the space in showers. So that's kind of another big space need. For election day and a little bit before election day, we actually, as you know, need space for some of our electronics and secure space for working. We're asking for a minimum of around 500 square feet, 450, 500 square feet of secure space. That would be used on election night by the tabulation team and the election board to actually tabulate results from the election. It would house a secure drop box for voters to deposit their vote by mail ballot. That's a change in the law this year. If we can contain a secure drop box under the provision and protection of the election board, we can have a drop box in the county. We couldn't do that in the fall. We want that. And that secure space would, of course, provide, as you know, we need secure space for storing ballots. So that's another space request, which we all know security is huge on elections. Then there's the whole training and workspace process. There's a lot of training that goes on. Over 400 election workers need training for each election. They need to know how to operate the equipment with some confidence. They need to know how to manage the ballots well and to understand the procedures to guide voters through the voting process. And although the procedures generally are the same election to election, there are a lot of nuances, both municipal versus other elections, and then legislation changes. So they just need refreshers and changes to procedures. It takes about 4.5 months out of a year for that training period to occur around election time. And about 2,000 square feet has been used in the past, and it's worked well. That space allows workers to have literally hands-on equipment and training. You know, it's not like sitting in a movie theater and watching a presentation. There are tables and chairs with equipment for each worker to use. And of course, it's always nice to have easy parking. And of course, we want to have it in a space that protects our equipment. If the training space is housed and is within, you know, it's not in a hotel somewhere or a convention center where we, you know, rent and pay for space. If it's somehow or another internal and available year round, then that space could also be used for, you know, there's trainings that go on for voter registration and other such trainings. There's preparing mailings that go out to Monroe County voters. We did 2 last year. There's been 1 this year already. There's going to be another one this year after redistricting. They're a fairly regular, time-consuming process. Literally just having space to organize, post all the materials and documents and forms and the materials and ballots that come back from election day. Just space helps us do that in an organized way. You know about re-precincting efforts, you know about election board meetings that go on. There's a lot of uses for a workspace, the conference room, a nice space. And we also need about 750 square feet, if possible, to organize election day materials. I know that sounds redundant, but while early voting is going on and voting by mail is going on and training is going on, there's also an important team that organizes supplies and materials and ballots for every poll on election day. And those are customized to the poll. And once they're organized, then poll workers usually the inspector comes in, picks up the supplies for their poll, takes them to the poll, and then they return them at night, including those precious voted ballots that they return to us. But having space to organize that when it goes out and when it comes in and organize it for them to pick up, it's just a whole nother separate function that occurs concurrently with all of the rest of the election activities. And I know many of you have worked elections, and I probably am speaking to the choir here a little bit, but I just wanted just as reminders, because they're helpful, and for the public if they're listening. Thank you for listening to our brief review of our space needs for kind of 5 big important activities that occurred during elections and the number of months that we really do use the space for those. Early voting, in-person, absentee, voting by mail, absentee, managing our equipment, needing a secure workspace, and training and workspace just for the general office to do what's important to process everything. I do have one more comment, and it looks like you guys are listening, so I appreciate that. I wanted to make a couple of comments regarding vote centers, because when you spoke at the election board last week, you mentioned this, fairly regularly. You spoke of your interest in vote centers to the election board. And as you know, vote centers really operate on election day. Many of us in our community in Monroe County support the idea of being able to vote at any of the polls on election day, not just the poll where your precinct is assigned to vote. That's how a vote center works. You can go to any poll in Monroe County to vote if you're registered to vote in Monroe County. If the 2 major political parties in the county and the voters in Monroe County support voting at vote centers instead of voting at one of the individual 28 voting sites that we currently use in Monroe County, the election team would be pleased to implement vote center voting. It would require the purchase of some additional equipment, but please know that we would make vote centers happen for voters in Monroe County. That's all I'm going to say. I probably told you things that you already know, but because we've talked so much about Election Central, there's more that goes on and more space needs than just the space that we all think of as that early voting site. And we wanted a chance to review it and to document the space needs that we feel really is going to help us. So with that, Karen is here, I'm here, if we can answer any questions.
My colleagues have any comments or questions, Mr. Cockrell?
Yeah, I just wanted to, she went through a lot of numbers really fast. So I kind of tried to keep a running total.
I saw a couple of you doing that.
So I got 10,450 square feet plus 2,000 square feet for training. Was that the totals that I should have gotten?
It's around 12,000 if you add it all together. I would be happy to break it out for you individually or share I have it on paper. I'm happy to share any of that documentation you would like.
I would really appreciate it if you could send that along.
I didn't know what you had received in advance. I'm happy to do that, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you. My colleagues have questions, comments? You're muted.
Sorry about that. I just wanted to mention that last week there was a good deal of discussion about how vote centers could actually be used to suppress the vote, which, because it is the election board that sets the vote centers, I would certainly, I personally trust the election board to not use it for suppressing votes. I think that everyone on the election board is actually looking to help as many people as possible to vote and vote easily.
Yes.
So I just want to assure anyone on the election board that I do trust them, and I do not believe that they would ever be engaged in voter suppression.
Commissioner Giffens?
Yeah, last week when I was talking to a friend, I realized that in the discussion with the election board regarding space, we need to make it clear to the public what our different roles are here. It's up to the election board to determine the need for satellite locations and for early voting and whether or not vote centers should be used within Monroe County. That's not just the two major parties, that's also the clerk that's involved in that. But with that said, it's unfair to imply that the Board of Commissioners bear any responsibility for the long lines that were seen at early voting in the 2020 general election, or to accuse us of any form of voter suppression, especially since we offered space in both the Showers Building and at the Monroe Convention Center for that satellite voting in 2020. And we've said this before, but if additional funding were needed to staff one or more early voting satellite locations in 2020, we would have supported the election board's petition to the county council for more funding. Allocation of space for different departments is the responsibility of the Board of Commissioners. I'll point out that in 2020, when there was a request to renovate Election Central to better utilize the space that was available, the Board of Commissioners and our staff responded really quickly to make that happen. We were happy to do it. And I had the feeling that the staff at the Election Central were pleased with what had happened. Over the past several weeks, and I think Attorney Cockle pointed this out, we've heard a request from the election board and members of the public to make the entire building available at 405 West 7th Street, a place that we generally call Johnson Hardware Building, for that entire election division. That's 13,000 square feet. And as Mr. Cockle pointed out, I haven't heard a request for 13,000 square feet. In the request I've seen from the election board, the space needs are spelled out in a way that entirely fills this 13,000 square feet without fully justifying those needs. And as Ms. Morris pointed out, there is a need to store election equipment. So I'd like to know where that equipment is being stored right now, how much space it's currently occupying, what the cost of the storage is, and what additional space the election board feels is needed to store this equipment. She did give us some square footage today. That's a little more than what we've had, I feel like, in the past. I'd also like the same thing laid out for counted and marked ballots, which were not discussed today, and for the special paper that's used for ballots. So I also would like to hear about the rationale for the need to store those marked ballots after they've been counted in the same building as other election functions, especially when there's so many competing needs for space in downtown Bloomington. And are there other ways, such as with storage shelving, which moves on tracks, to be more efficient with the current storage space that we have? I also think it's important to completely separate the need for permanent functions of the election division with the temporary needs. The training of poll workers, for example, is a temporary need. I think it's unreasonable to set aside 2,500 square feet, which is what was originally requested, a space that's larger than the Nat U Hill room in the county courthouse for training that's conducted just weeks out of the year. It might be 20% of the time, but in my opinion, that's not a good use of expensive downtown space. So if the Board of Commissioners is presented with a type of space request I want to see, we may recommend moving the election division to another location. We've heard multiple times that voters want their voting place to stay the same, but these reports are anecdotal, and unless I'm presented with research on the subject, I'm not inclined to be strongly swayed by them. The number of polling locations was cut in half in the 2020 primary election. And because the election division did a good job of advertising those changes, there was no major outcry at all from the voters that I heard. And I was out at 2 of the different polling places that day, handing out masks to voters. So in an effort to collaborate, I asked that the election board to please provide the Board of Commissioners with a detailed request for space in writing, one that spells out what is currently in use and the justification for all additional space needs, both permanent and temporary. Thank you.
I think it's important to note, and I know I could, I think we're all in agreement here that the statements that we're making. I think there were, I think it's important to note that the long lines at early voting in 2020 were not the fault of the poll workers because they were doing a great job. It was not the fault of staff. So I know that we all had to, as with everything in the pandemic, we all had to change a lot of things about how we do things. Yeah. And I think the space we were told was sufficient once we made the modifications, which was more than 3 square feet. It was removal of half walls. It was a re-flooring for safety. And so, but yes, now we're in the age of COVID. We don't know where it's going to go. We don't know how long it's going to last. Right. And so things change, and we understand that. I just feel like we continue to have this conversation at this work session, and it feels like we're not getting anywhere. So I really would like to see a working group created that can talk through these issues one at a time and figure, determine what information is needed, get that information, get back to our respective groups for discussion and resolution, because otherwise we're going to continue to have weekly sessions where we're presented with information, we ask for information, we're presented with information, we ask for information. It's not a good use of anybody's time, honestly. And I think at this point, the public understands what's going on, I think. But yes, we want to help, as we said last week, to the election board. And I think if we can get somebody from the election board, folks from the clerk's office, I don't know who's going to be on that, but I just feel like we need to move on to something else that's productive at this point. And I hope that we can do that. Not your responsibility. And I do appreciate both Ms. Morris and Ms. Wheeler for being here today, providing additional information, as always. With that, it looks like we don't typically take public comment. Mr. Turner is here from the election board. It's up to my colleagues whether or not they want to hear from him at this point, or if we should move on.
If we do hear from him, will we be setting a precedent for future occasions?
Yeah, we typically don't take public comment unless we're voting on something on a work session. But I'm happy to bend the rules today if you all want me to.
I would suggest that while you may be setting precedent, since he is on the election commission, that precedent could be very narrow.
Yeah. Are you all right with that? Okay. Mr. Turner, looks like you've been brought over. There you are. Good afternoon, Mr. Turner.
Good afternoon. 2 things. One, yesterday, the clerk and the election board met in a special work session to begin providing the very information that you're asking for, which would be bringing this to a conclusion. We're not ready to present that today. It will take us a couple of weeks to get that information together, but we will make sure we get on your calendar, and we will we'll have one final session when we will present you what you're looking for.
Excellent.
What we're looking for.
Good.
In one package. The other is the comments regarding vote centers. The concern is not with the existing laws or regulations or the existing board. We're trying to look forward in case the state laws change that don't require a unanimous vote in order to modify the configuration of vote centers, and that we were looking at the possibility that in that situation where the laws change and it doesn't require a unanimous vote, then there may be a suboptimal position for some voters based on new configurations. So we're just trying to look at the voter in the long term to protect their interests.
That's great.
That's all.
Thank you for the update. Thank you for the information, Mr. Turner. We appreciate your service on the election board as always. All right. Good. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for listening. And thank you especially to Penny for detailing, the specific information needs that you're asking for. That's helpful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. We do appreciate all the work you guys do.
Absolutely.
Thanks. All right. Number 2 on the agenda, Mr. Schilling. There he is. This is regarding demolition order 6725 South Harmony Road.
Yes, good evening or afternoon, commissioners. I have two items for you today. The first one relates to the unsafe building law. And under that law, if the building commissioner finds a structure that is dilapidated or damaged by fire and presents a safety hazard to the public, the commissioner can order it demolished, and the commissioner's written order is sent to the landowner and recorded in the recorder's office. A hearing is scheduled before the commissioners to determine whether the order should be confirmed, and if it is, then compliance with the demolition order is sought. And if that compliance is achieved, then the order is rescinded and a written rescission document is then recorded in the recorder's office to sort of complete that process. In this case, we had a unsafe building order issued for a structure at 6725 South Harmony Road. A hearing was scheduled. That order was recorded. A hearing was scheduled for September 1st. We learned that day that received a phone call that day saying that the building had been demolished according to the order. And so I went out today and confirmed that that had taken place. So we have obtained compliance with the order, and we would like to have the commissioners approve the rescission document, which has been provided to you. And I don't know if technical services could pull up some of the pictures that we sent earlier. 3 of them were taken last month. This is one from last month. And if you could just go through those 3 pictures. You see that the building has been damaged by and that's the picture of the site from the driveway, and that was how the building existed in August. And then the next picture, I think, will show you what it looks like today. There we go. Building's gone, and the ground has been seeded and strawed. So we're happy to report compliance and request that the commissioners approve the rescission document, which will be recorded.
Okay, comments, questions, Commissioner Jones?
No, I don't. That seems like just what we like to hear.
Commissioner Giffens?
You're muted.
Yeah, sorry, thanks. There's a lot going on at my house too. Yeah, I was glad to see that it was properly taken care of.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to go ahead and make a motion that we rescind the demolition order for 6725 South Harmony Road.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other comments or questions? Mr. Cockrell, will you please call the roll on rescission of demolition order?
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Githens.
Yes.
Motion is approved, 3-0.
All right, thank you. And you have another item for us on right of way.
Yes, this relates to an eminent domain proceeding that the county has filed to obtain right-of-way for a road project. And we are at the stage in that process where trial is about 45 days away. And there's what's called the 45-day offer. And so that's the county's last chance to make a final offer on the right-of-way value, the taking of the right-of-way. And we're seeking today authority to offer $185,000 as the 45-day offer. And the reason why the 45-day offer is special is if the defendant is able through a jury trial to obtain more than the 45-day offer, then attorneys up to $25,000. If they obtain less than $185,000 of the 45-day offer, then they are not entitled to be reimbursed for attorney's fees. And this request comes from the Yasmin Stump Law Group, who is representing the county on this case.
Ms. Ridge, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I didn't know if you would have questions on the budget, but we do have the funds set aside since this was an ongoing situation.
Okay. And where is this at?
This is for the Sample Road project.
Sample East?
West.
West. Okay, thank you. Thanks. Comments, questions, Commissioner Jones?
Yeah, I was wondering what the amount of the original offer was.
I don't have it in front of me. I believe it was 131.5, Dave.
I think that's close. Yeah, I don't have the file myself.
And it's kind of been going back and forth.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Githens?
No, thank you.
Okay. Do we need to make a motion on the 45-day offer?
Please.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and move that we make a 45-day offer of $185,000 on the right-of-way purchase in question.
Second.
Okay. Other comments, questions? All right, Mr. Cockrell, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Githens.
Yes.
Motion is approved, 3-0.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Ms. Purdy, you have item 6.
I do. Item 6 is actually just requesting, let me get to it here, an interconnection agreement between our solar facility at the Emergency Operations Center and Duke Electric. Once we do this, then we can start actually using our solar array. There is no cost associated with this. This is just an agreement that needs to be signed.
Okay. Mr. Cockrell, is this something that has to be ratified at our meeting?
I think that would not need to be ratified. This is contemplated when we put the system in.
Yeah.
If you wish to ratify it, that's fine. This is just kind of the housekeeping to kind of end the process and get it working.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and move that we approve the interconnection agreement with Duke.
Second.
Other comments, questions? my colleagues?
I'm glad it's moving forward.
Yeah. All right. Mr. Cockrell, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Githens.
Yes.
Motion is approved, 3-0.
Excellent. Thank you all. Let's see if there's any other department heads who have items they wish to bring forward. I do not see any. So with that, our work session is adjourned. Our next meeting is September 15th, next Wednesday. All right. Thanks, everyone. Be well, get vaccinated.